First, thank you everybody for attending. My name is Jared Randy, and I'm manager of the Apple Systems Engineering team here at Publix Supermarkets. And like that sounds, my team is solely dedicated to the deployment, the support, and the engineering of all company-owned Apple devices. And one of the things that makes us unique within Publix anyway is that we cross each part of the business. So not only do we support corporate, but we support the retail business, the distribution side of the business, in manufacturing. And so what that means is that while we support the MacBooks in our marketing department, we also support the iOS devices that are in our retail locations. Now, to give you a scope of Publix's retail presence, we operate over 1,290 stores in 7 states across the Southeast US. We also have 9 distribution centers and 11 manufacturing facilities where we make everything from ice cream to potato salad to grab and go sandwiches. Our stores are known both for our customer service and our chicken tender subs. Now, since we're a grocery store with a focus on premier customer service, the fact that we have such an emphasis on improving internal service should come as no surprise. In fact, if we're taking care of our people, they can take care of our customers. Now, while my team makes managing iOS and retail look easy now, it didn't start that way. And that was the journey that I wanted to share. It's a journey that has 3 parts that boils down to a quote I think sums up a lot of technology work, which is everything is easy, everything is hard before it is easy. And now, one of the things I asked my team in the beginning was, why is this so complicated? In 2018, we just finished successfully deploying Jamf for our macOS environment. And after doing an almost complete nuke and pave of the environment, everything worked the way we wanted. Tickets were down, we were spending less time resolving issues, and we went from being very busy to having more time for actually engineering improvements. And because of that success, we were asked by our management to take over the support of our iPhones used by some of our pharmacies. These had been deployed a year earlier to support a service called Meds to Beds. Patients at some hospitals have the option to opt into a service in order to have their pharmacy medications delivered to the room without the customer having to make a trip to the pharmacy. And we thought, yeah, we could totally do that. It did not go smoothly. Now, we had to figure out what we'd gotten ourselves into. So the first thing was getting the document detailing how these iPhones were set up. They were set up within our staging center, which is here in Central Florida. And the techs used a document that was 10 pages long and walked them through each setting within the Settings app. It detailed what to do in the Settings Setup Assistant. It detailed which Apple ID to use for which phone. It detailed which apps to delete and which to rearrange. And overall, this document had almost 70 steps for a tech to manually check and set up an iPhone. And even worse, there was no way to audit if any of those steps had been taken correctly. This entire process per phone took almost an hour. And so we figured the fastest way to clean things up was to use Configurator, since our Jamf Pro server wasn't exposed to the internet. The nice thing about Configurator was that we could at least ensure consistent setup. This made setup and training a little bit easier, and it certainly made our security team happy. But because we were so early in this process, we were stuck with the Apple IDs. Primarily used for apps and the purchase of the apps because they had been purchased under those Apple IDs. So there was a lot of manual labor required. And we figured we can get the process down from an hour to maybe about 20 minutes and reduce some of those setup errors. And because this was a new program, we only had 20 stores to go to. And between 2 of us, we figured we could be done in about 3 days. So armed with our new configurations, we drove out to our first stores just 1 week after being sent on this mission. And at the first store, I was laughed at. And they knew I was coming, and they thought I was returning a phone that had been sent in for support 6 weeks earlier. Uh, so they thought it was quite funny that I was showing up there empty-handed. Uh, that means one of the phones I was looking for was missing. The other one was in use. And after a few phone calls, I found this missing iPhone on our staging center shelf. It had been sent in for support, just like the store said, and had been forgotten about for a few weeks. I set up the remaining iPhone, a spare they had borrowed from another store, and promised to return the next day. At the next store, the story was about the same. They had loaned one out to the store I'd just come from. One was at the setup assistant because it had been reset, and the others were in use. On one of those phones, two-factor authentication had been enabled for iCloud, but the number that was used hadn't been recorded. This story repeated itself 5 different times at different locations. So, as you can imagine, there was a feeling that the pharmacy's IT needs were not being taken seriously. And it was also strengthening the myth amongst my peers that Apple devices were not manageable. So, for us, it was important to take care of this as quickly as possible. And also, it was important for the pharmacy to be taken, because their needs needed to be taken care of as well. Now, before we got too far, we decided that the best course of action was to remove the staging center completely from the process. They hadn't been set up for success, and it was unfair to stick them with that work. While this meant a little bit more field work for us in the short term, it gave us a chance to ease that friction that had been generated in the previous year. It also gave us a chance to dig into how the iPhones were actually being used. For example, the passcode is required to be changed regularly, but associates don't always share this information with other shifts if they change it. That means that there's always a wiped iPhone. It also gave us a chance to experience the life of a retail associate up close. The phone was always ringing, the customers always had questions, and ensuring prescriptions are accurate can take a lot of focus. So this means that asking a pharmacy tech to call in each problem, wait for a call back, and maybe have to play phone tag means that a lot of issues end up going unreported. So making them more self-sufficient was really important. The associates were also often asked if their iPhones were personal. The cases initially chosen were multiple colors in an attempt to help keep them separate, but they didn't look like Publix equipment. And lastly, the Apple IDs was complicating the setup of these iPhones. So managing passwords and making changes to the accounts were adding unnecessary steps that weren't actually adding any value. And so we spent a year setting up our on-prem Jamf Pro server, and we're still trying to figure out how to move away from imaging. And now we were presented with this challenge of managing iPhones that were already out in the world. And so it was clear that we didn't have the right tools, but we needed to figure out what those right tools were. We knew the first thing to do was move our management to the cloud. It was going to be a lot faster than trying to expose our on-prem server to the internet. And with a new server, we could correct the mistakes with the lessons we just learned during the first setup. So 3 months after our visit to a pharmacy, we issued a PO for Jamf Cloud, and we had that first part done. But we had other issues that needed to be solved. We needed a zero-touch workflow so the stores could configure devices on their own. This meant we also needed to get rid of the Apple IDs. We needed a tool that would allow our help desk and my team to have the ability to remote view an iPhone's display. And the last thing was a way to distribute certs and allow for LDAP authentication. So, like so many large organizations, we have a complicated infrastructure. So we knew changes weren't going to happen fast. For Apple Business Manager, we had to reach out to our vendors and have devices added retroactively that avoid going through and adding them manually with Configurator. We also needed a way to query our on-prem Active Directory and deploy certs. So we chose Infrastructure Manager as a critical tool for allowing that LDAP authentication, and it allowed us to look at the groups and the user information stored in AD. Jamf ADCS connector also plays a vital role in delivering certs supplied by our internal CA. These certs provide secure access to Wi-Fi, VPN, and other resources that can be easily scaled while maintaining the security of our CA. Now, to reduce time spent explaining issues to the help desk or to us, we deployed Beyond Trust's remote support tools. This allows others to see what the associates were experiencing in the stores, which makes troubleshooting much easier. It also means faster support resolutions, and it reduced miscommunication with the help desk, and it helped prevent some trips to the stores. And one of the great benefits of using Beyond Trust solution for us is that it allows us to extend this function to personal devices that are not in. So with those tools in place, a new iPhone can be set up inside the store. And we can also utilize Jamf Reset as a troubleshooting step. Zero touch enrollment means there's no need to call the help desk, open a ticket, wait for a call back, miss that call back again, and spend a week trying to speak to someone just to have someone else say, mail it to the staging center. It means more time helping customers and less time talking to someone in IT. It also means never having to return to mailing those iPhones back and forth. We also wanted to focus on making things easier for associates more directly. So while we were toiling away in the background setting up infrastructure, we spent a lot of time getting the user experience right. So before we started, this is how the home screen looked, pretty much like any other iPhone. And like I said earlier, associates have a lot on their plate. So reducing steps and taps and swipes is all part of the puzzle. So we went from this to this. Removing some of that visual clutter is the quickest way to ease frustration. And it also eased training since every iPhone behaved the same and looked the same. Now that the iPhone is enrolled, we still need some information about where it is. Since we don't have iBeacons at the store, and since these are used primarily off of our internal network, we can't automate this step. So using Jamf's APIs, we built an app that associates can use to fill in additional info to complete that configuration. It also means that we can deploy new devices to stores without staging them first. And because we include the serial number in the name of our devices, it's easy to use the API to modify records. This makes sure that the asset tag information, primarily used by our asset management team, is referenced in each inventory record. And it also helps us gather the building number, which in our case is usually the store. We use it for smart groups so that we can deploy config profiles meant for certain locations, or in some cases, sets of locations. Because we operate in different hospitals, each location may have different needs, like an internal website or some unique wireless configs. And they may also have different apps for collaboration within that hospital staff. So what was once taking between 2 and 6 weeks now takes about 5 minutes. As you can imagine, this is a huge improvement, and it requires a lot less IT resources. Now, this part isn't technical, but part of what we heard during those early visits was that the pharmacy techs were often asked if the iPhones were personal. So we worked with OtterBox to develop a case to better highlight that this is a public's owned device. It helps reinforce the iPhone is secure, and it helps reinforce that our pharmacy techs were just texting with their friends while they were discussing private health information. So it creates that perception that everything is safe. So it took some work, but the iPhones are easier to manage, and there's fewer requests for support. There's faster resolutions when they're needed, and overall, they're more trusted by both our retail associates and our customers. So that means the only IT involvement now is in troubleshooting some of those apps, investigating network problems, or making config changes. So as you can imagine, the relationship between IT and the business area has improved quite dramatically. Now, when we started down this path, I wouldn't have guessed we'd get praise from the business area, and I certainly wouldn't have expected expanding this program to other states. But both of those things have happened, and it wouldn't have been possible before. So, as a quick recap for some of you who may be starting on your own iOS journey, what we implemented was Jamf Cloud, Apple Business Manager, Infrastructure Manager to deploy certs, ADCS connector to deploy or to support authentication, Jamf Reset to allow us associates to easily reset an iPhone as a troubleshooting step, Beyond Trust remote support, cases from OtterBox, and an app developed using the APIs. We also removed the Apple IDs completely from the process. This means that there's no login per phone, and we can now distribute apps to any device. So, if it's so easy, why can't everything be like this? Well, we're working on that. Shortly after we took on the pharmacy iPhones, we were asked to take on our new curbside delivery programs iPhones. And just like pharmacy, our omni-channel team had bought some iPhones to test delivery before realizing they needed something a little bit more managed if they wanted to scale beyond 5 stores. So we applied all the same thinking into these phones that we had to the pharmacy phones, which was good because in April of 2020, we had to quickly help scale this up to every single store. Since we'd already set up our workflows, assuming that this would make it there eventually, we were able to do this without any additional IT resources. Now, the biggest challenge for these phones isn't technical. It's that they're often left on customers' car bumpers or in their trunks. And one of the services we're able to provide is the ability to locate these devices, even if they've been run over a few times in the street like this one. Luckily, that's not always the case, and an iPhone can be returned quickly and put back into service, delivering groceries to customers. Now, realizing you've lost an iPhone and then calling it into the help desk, and then having that location sent by email can allow a lot of time to pass by, especially if that iPhone is just in the parking lot or worse, it's been stolen. So we've been working on an app, again, using the APIs, that would allow a store to put an iPhone into lost mode quickly. So as you can see here, store can launch an app, quickly set a device into lost mode, and then get the location. And maybe even play a lost sound so that you can locate it within the store or to help a customer realize that an iPhone made it home with them. It also prevents that device from being used by anybody else. It displays the serial number and the IMEI to help law enforcement in the unfortunate event that it was actually stolen and not just lost in one of the shopping carts in the store. This continues our focus on making sure that stores are more self-sufficient and that they're empowered to do things on their own. One of the other things that we've done is, especially for the curbside phones, is that we help develop a way to handle training directly on the phones. So instead of calling the help desk for something like a jammed receipt printer, they can pull up a quick video and take care of it themselves. Because we're always hiring new people, we set up job fairs to attract associates. The old process required shipping Windows-based tablets back to our staging center, just like we did with the pharmacy phones, and before and after each event. Now, the hiring team can set up, reset, and update iPads all on their own. This reduces the time required between events and allows the team to increase the number of events that they're able to hold. This eases pressure on IT teams by making them more self-sufficient, and it helps empower them to make decisions on how to work versus having IT force it on them. So traditionally, technology solutions within retail are engineered to accomplish a very specific task. Examples include point of sale or ATMs. And there's a lot of instances where iOS in retail means kiosks. But what we've tried to do, when possible, is make the devices a platform so that when someone picks up a device, they can use that muscle memory they've built up using their own personal iPhones. We want to make sure that every associate can access data where they need it and empower them with as much freedom as possible without relying on IT for every single support situation. So there's always a challenge to doing that, but that's the best way to improve internal customer service. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And I look forward to your questions.